Defining a custom workflow. This video will cover spec workflow options, creating and changing the workflow, specification types, and state automation. The workflow is configured using the DevSuite admin. We start by selecting our DevSpec project and navigating to the workflow section. Workflow options allows you to select whether or not to enable applicable owners, read-only fields, invisible fields, mandatory fields, and who can perform. We'll see just how all these features work when we look at the workflow settings. First though, let's look at how a workflow is designed. We design a workflow using the Graphical Workflow Design tool. New states can be added by simply right-clicking and giving the state a name. Then transitions are added by dragging from one state to another. We'll create one here to go to our new state. Once we've designed our workflow, we can begin to configure workflow settings. In the left box, we can see all of the configurable states and transitions. Each state is essentially the parent to a set of transitions that can be used to exit that state. So here in the develop state, we can see a single transition option called Work Review. For each transition, we can configure the initial spec type, and if we want to, change the spec type when the transition is taken. We'll go into more detail on spec types a bit later. Also, if the option is enabled, we can configure what account types, groups, or users are able to execute this transition. So, for example, if we only wanted product managers to be able to move a develop item into work review, we would configure that here. Now for each state, we'll be able to see any transitions that are available. As with the transitions, if the option is enabled, we can configure applicable owners. We can set individual fields to be read-only, invisible, or mandatory when an item is in the selected state. And finally, we can set up automatic versioning if it is needed. Automatic versioning can automatically create a snapshot of an item if the selected fields are changed while it is in the selected state. Let's take a look at how all this works in the DevSpec user interface. When I create a new item, it'll start out in the new state. I will now have the option to take it through any of the configured transitions. When I take the item through a transition, it will move into the next state, and any settings that I've configured for that state will be reflected. So, for example, if I move the item into the ready to implement state via the go to development transition, I will see that the product/version and title fields are now read-only. Also within the admin, you can set up spec types. The system comes with a few predefined types, but you can add your own, such as a use case to fit your processes. The system type maps the label you've created to the selected system type. You can enable a custom page overwrite for spec types. This basically means that you can configure a custom form or interface for each specification type. Finally, in the workflow settings, we allow for a variety of state automations. From here, you can restrict what state a spec item must be in before it can be planned for development. You can automatically transition a spec into a state like in development when all the tasks linked to it have been assigned. And you can automatically transition to a state like developed or work review when all the tasks are completed.